Dover Road.
Very shortly as well. Just go to lbc.co.uk.
Turn right onto Dover Road.
The Steve Allen shows and everybody else's programmes on there you can download. It's fantastic. And it's free. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning for Steve Allen's early breakfast from 4 until 7. Coming up at 10 this morning, James O'Brien. But right now, with your Monday breakfast, it's Nick Frost.
Continue for 1.5 miles.
Monday, June the 27th, a weekend of protests across the United States at that Roe v. Wade verdict. Now, corporate America enters the fray by offering staff free travel to states where abortions will be permitted. Back to the UK. Prince Charles could be investigated for taking around €3 million in cash as donations to his charity.
We understand that it was €1 million in cash in a suitcase, and that other cash donations were made, some of them in Fortnum and Mason's carrier bags.
What was he thinking? Meanwhile, Boris Johnson speaking at the G7 summit about the war in Ukraine.
The consequences of what's happening for the world are tough, but the price of backing down, the price of allowing Putin to continue with his program of conquest, that will be far, far higher.
And if you're working from home, get ready for a pay cut, whether you like it or not. After the news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, Ukraine's president will ask world leaders at the G7 summit later to be partners, not observers, in his country's fight against Russia. A Russian airstrike destroyed residential buildings in Kiev yesterday, and Volodymyr Zelensky will use his video link address to request more air defences. Speaking in Germany, US President Joe Biden highlighted the importance of unity.
When democracies demonstrate what we can do, all that we have to offer, I have no doubt that we'll win the competition every time.
Patients waiting over 2 years for surgery are to be matched up with hospitals out of their area for treatment. NHS England wants to make use of regions with availability as the health service tackles a backlog worsened by the COVID pandemic. It's aiming to eliminate the 2-year waiting list by the end of July. A man has been seriously injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Birmingham overnight. Paramedics say neighbours pulled the man from the rubble of the destroyed building in King's Standing. 4 others were also hurt. LBC's Josh Giltrap is at the scene.
The house is now gone, I can see from the cordon here, and the neighbouring ones either side have had the windows blown off. They're very badly damaged. Neighbours I've spoken to here have told me they felt their houses shake from the blast, mainly initially thinking it was a bomb or a sonic boom, just not really knowing what it was. There's also been stories of people trying to rush in and help.
An emergency summit on abortion care and buffer zones around clinics is taking place in Edinburgh today. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says it's an important opportunity to reaffirm women's autonomy and right to choose. It comes just days after the US Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to abortion for millions of Americans. Wimbledon gets underway this morning with matches played out in front of full capacity crowds for the first time in 3 years. Russian and Belarusian athletes have been banned from competing over the war in Ukraine, meaning the Grand Slam has been stripped of ranking points. Two-time champion Andy Murray doesn't feel that takes anything away from the prestige of one of the sport's 4 majors.
This is the best tournament in our sport. It's not defined by ranking points. It has a huge history and tradition. There wasn't ranking points at this event, 60, 70 years ago. And yeah, I'm here to try and win Wimbledon, not to win ranking points.
In the city, the FTSE 100 will reopen at 72.08 after closing up 188 points on Friday. The pound buys $1.22 and €1.16. The weather, a band of showery rain will move eastwards. Heavy in places, a risk of thunder in the east this afternoon. Western areas turning dry with sunny spells, a high of 21 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Holly Harris.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep hold of things you'd normally lose? Your keys, your purse, your train of thought. Sorry, or your mobile data. Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, our mobile rolls your spare data for up to 3 years, so you can keep hold of what you've paid for. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible. See sky.com/mobile for terms.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning, 3 minutes after 7 on Monday, June the 27th. Just days to go then before those laws are changed in the United States as regards Roe v. Wade. Demonstrations across much of the US. Now corporate America getting involved and seeming to support women offering free travel if they go to the state. It will, of course, as you will have heard already on OBC Now, be determined on a state-by-state basis. We'll look at that in more detail. Back to that story, the Prince of Wales could face an investigation after accepting a suitcase of cash from a controversial Qatari politician. Gabriel Pogrund, who's the Whitehall editor of the Sunday Times, broke the story.
It should be clear nothing sort of allegedly illegal has happened here, but it is all about standards, propriety, image, and these are important things for an institution that.
In 300 yards, keep right to continue towards Turns Lane, A355.
LBC News Bulletin's missiles rained down on Kyiv for the first time in 3 weeks. Meanwhile, to Bavaria for that summit, and the Prime Minister saying that in some instances having to pay more in the stores and indeed at the pumps is the price we must pay. In other stories, Brian Dowth, Chief Executive of Mental Health, speaking yesterday after Sajid Javid had discussed his brother taking his life.
Incredibly courageous of him as a leading political figure to come out and talk so frankly, because we kind of expect our politicians to be beyond conventional emotions and superhuman at times.
Strike action. No, not rail workers, post workers, doctors or nurses, but barristers who want a 25% pay rise. That is an extraordinary amount. They're not at work. You might be, but if you're working from home, get ready, pay cuts, and you might have no say in it whatsoever. Oh, and
an island of wet wipes the size of 2 tennis courts has formed in the Thames. I'm LBC's Charlotte Lynch at the Mound in Barnes in West London.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 97.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
I would imagine many of you have been discussing this over the weekend, the Roe v. Wade verdict and the overturning, and of course it's led to demonstrations across much of the United States. Corporate America getting involved now. Major US firms vowing to defy the overturning of women's rights to legal abortions by covering the costs of staff who travel to other states for the procedure. We're talking about companies such as Apple, Disney, Microsoft, Amazon, JP Morgan, and even, interestingly enough, Alaska Airlines. On Friday, the court overturned a ruling from 1973 known as Roe v. Wade. I cannot explain to you, if you've ever lived or worked in the United States, this is of such huge importance, not least the fact it's still playing on 50 years later, isn't it? Now, this had guaranteed American women the constitutional right.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
Judgment now means women living in roughly half of the 50 states who require abortion must go elsewhere for the procedure. I say again, this is of such magnitude in the US. Here's how Fox broke the story.
From the news station, this is a Fox 4 News Alert.
The case regarding Roe versus Wade is now in. According to our reports from the U.S. Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade has been overturned.
And this was President Joe Biden reacting shortly after that verdict came in.
With 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset balance of our law. State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, so extreme that women can be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls who are forced to bear their rapist's child. It just stuns me.
That's President Biden. Just to explain, of course, a sitting president has the power to nominate someone to go to what's called the Supreme Court, and that is why he's referencing the work of previous President Donald Trump. Now, staying with the Republican side, the minority leader of the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, speaking after the ruling.
You know, today's Supreme Court decision in Dobbs is the most important pro-life ruling in American history. By a vote of 6-3, the court affirmed that the power to protect unborn life is returned to the people and their elected representatives. The people have won a victory. The right to life has been vindicated. The voiceless will finally have a voice. This great nation can now live up to its core principle that all are created equal, not born equal, created equal.
Someone who also had a voice on this, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, speaking in Kigali on the weekend.
This is not our court, it's another jurisdiction, but clearly it has massive impacts on people's thinking around the world. It's a very important decision. I've got to tell you, I think it's a big step backwards. I've always believed in a woman's right to choose, and I stick to that view, and that's why the UK has the laws that it does.
And just briefly, of course, protests from, it has to be said, both sides, anti-abortion protesters. And on the other side, pro-choice protesters. These are in Texas. How toxic it is in the United States. Here to discuss, Sonia Soda, who's chief leader writer at The Observer and had a very powerful page devoted to it yesterday, with the headline, "When even the term woman is scorned, judges were never going to defend abortion rights." And Aisling Goodison, who's spokesperson for the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK. And if we can, I'm going to start with Aisling. I understand that you are welcoming of what's taking place in the United States. If I got that correct, why might that be? Good morning.
Yes, I really believe this is a victory for human life, and that this is a victory for women. This is a victory for America, and we can congratulate them for this bold move forward, because what they've done is they've just re-elevated the right to life back to where it should be. They've handed this, the Supreme Court has handed this decision back to the states essentially. They're allowing the democratic process to now kick in, and states can say, do you know what, we value this right, we value the unborn, and we're going to give them back their right to life. We're going to recognise them as persons again. Their personhood status has been stripped from them for over 50 years. Like, this is such great discrimination based on age and location in this, and the unborn size. And now they're going to be recognised as people again. So this is a victory.
Okay. Thank you for please don't go. Thank you for summing up your stance. I don't think necessarily welcome the same fashion as Sonia Soda, who I referenced earlier from The Observer. Sonia, now get your reaction briefly on what you've heard now.
Well, I think this is a massive step backwards for women in America. I think it's important to say that there's no effective way to ban abortion, actually, no matter what your ethical stance is on it, because we know from history that when abortion is made illegal and unlawful, women will find other ways, desperate women. I think it's degrading and inhumane to force a woman to carry a pregnancy that's unwanted to term. And I think we really need to focus on, I think the estimate is now 18 million women in the US will live more than 200 miles from an abortion clinic, and there are women there, poor women who can't afford to travel, who sometimes can't afford even to have a baby, and they are women whose lives will be put at risk when they now have to go and seek backstreet unlawful abortions. It makes them vulnerable to all sorts of kind of financial and sexual exploitation by criminals. So I think it was a huge step back in terms of women's rights and women's rights to choose, essentially.
Aisling, Sonia is right. This will not stop women getting abortions. Surely it will just potentially imperil their lives.
This provides an opportunity for real hope for women. It's now time for the resources that have been spent on abortion to be funneled back into the pregnancy care centres, the counselling centres. All this finance and resource can now be really used to give women real hope. And of course we know that women, they've been given and fed this lie that abortion is the solution to suffering, but we know that abortion compounds it. there's endless testimonies of women who have experienced so much post-traumatic stress following their abortions. Mental, physical health has been impacted, and now we can say, look, there is hope. There's hope for you. There's an alternative.
I'll put that to Sonia, but just reflect, if you would, on the words of the President. A woman would now have to give birth to a child conceived through rape. Can't possibly support that, can you?
Well, of course, I agree. Rape is one of the most horrific crimes committed against women, and the rapist should be locked up.
Yes,
Such a heinous
well,
crime, but
should
we give the child the death penalty for the rapist crime.
So just to clarify, you say mum has to go to full term with the product of a rape?
Well, to call a child a product is already a euphemism.
I apologise. If I didn't seek to offend you.
Yeah.
Let's put it another way. You believe the mother who has conceived through rape should then go to full term and give birth to the child?
So I believe that a mother who has conceived through rape needs care, support, counselling, and the lie is that killing her child will give her the solution to her suffering.
Sonia, what about the redirection of cash, as Aisling says? There will be and I would imagine we're talking about a lot of money that could go to these clinics, that could provide help, emotional as well as, of course, the physical side. Sonia Soda.
Well, I think we need to come back to this point about rape, and we're not talking about killing children here. I think there's a very important distinction to be made between a fetus, a group of cells, and a child, a born child. I think that's really important. I think on the rape point, this is really, really serious, because we know that violent men use sexual assault as forms of control within relationships, and to say that women should be forced to carry pregnancies to term that come as a result of rape from their abusers, I mean, that is essentially the state allying itself with those abusive men, because it's a form of control, and forcing women to give birth against their will to their abusers' babies, actually, it makes them more dependent on their abusers. And I'm sorry, if you want to fund pregnancy care services, there's absolutely nothing stopping you doing it. And the other point I would make is that actually one of the most effective ways to reduce the number of abortions is to channel money into contraceptive care, and that is something that...
In 2 miles, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Sonia's absolutely right. The science in this is really, really important, and the biggest question that we need to be focusing on is, when does human life begin? Because if the unborn persons, and if they aren't human beings scientifically and just on basic reason, then of course abortion is justified in every instance. But if they are human beings, and the science is conclusive on this, I don't think you'll find any biologist or embryologist who would disagree with that, because human beings reproduce after their own kind. So obviously they're human, the unborn are alive because they're growing, they're distinct, they're different to their parents, and they're whole, they're not human body parts, so they're distinct living whole human beings from that moment of fertilization. And if we really agree with human rights as a society, then the right to life must come before the right to choose.
I'm grateful to both of you. Thank you. We heard from Aisling Goodison, who's spokesperson for the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK, Sonia Soda, chief leader writer for the Observer newspaper. Indeed, you may be able to get online and see her lengthy piece in yesterday's paper. We'll take your views after the 7:16 LBC News headlines. Holly Harris.
Volodymyr Zelensky will appear at the G7 summit later via video link to ask for more artillery and air defences to help his country resist Russia's invasion. Patients waiting over 2 years for surgery are to be matched up with hospitals out of their area for treatment. And the Justice Secretary says a strike by barristers starting this week will only delay justice for victims. The weather wet in the east, dry with sunny spells in the west, a high of 21 Celsius.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. Delays of about half an hour on the M25 anti-clockwise from junction 26 at Waltham Abbey to 24 at Potter's Bar after a car broke down. In Upminster, the A127 remains closed both ways between Hall Lane and the M25 junction because investigation works are taking place after an accident last night. In Ilford, Cranbrook Road is closed both ways, and that's because of an ongoing police investigation. On the trains, Thameslink and LNER services can only run once an hour between Peterborough and Stevenage because of the theft of signalling cables. All other operators on that stretch have been suspended, and do expect delays at Southfield's Underground station on the District Line, and that's because it's the closest underground station to the Wimbledon Championships.
This is LBC.
Welcome back to Name the Engine Tune. 2 local garages are one question away from earning a place on the Green Flag Network. Final tune. Kipford Autos?
Shredded Sunbelt.
Bolton first-rate rescuers get to join our local breakdown network. Only the best get the green flag.
Call Nick Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Openreach are upgrading their national telecommunications network to an all-IP future. Before the end of 2025, all existing analog and ISDN lines will be switched off. Most existing broadband circuits must be upgraded to work with the new network. Now is a good time to upgrade to full fiber with Spitfire network services to achieve speeds of almost 1 gigabit per second and optimize your business-critical applications with a range of quality service options. Take action today and go to spitfire.co.uk/big-switch-off. Spitfire, award-winning telephone and internet solutions for business since 1988.
Tax credits are ending and the Department for Work and Pensions will be moving people across to Universal Credit by 2024. Search Understanding Universal Credit to find out more. Eligibility criteria apply.
We are a reclaim your power.
T's and C's apply. Redeem through PayPal. Fees charged.
We are a get money in your pocket. Download the app today.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973.
19 minutes after 7, come to your reactions in a moment. Quickly through the front page of the newspapers. It was a fairly classic Sunday for Monday last night, I sense. Although a lot of them actually go with...
In 300 yards at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Positive emanating from there, which is why we can certainly go with it. I'm not saying it was a positive decision, but my goodness me, it prompts conversation, the decision that was taken, the verdict that came in on Friday night over in the United States. But to Ukraine, for many of them, Biden to block...
Exit at junction 3.
This is the Daily Telegraph. This is the idea put forward, or to be put forward by Boris Johnson, to ease the cost of living crisis.
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway, A312.
With price cap on crude exports. There's the Times, PM in Ukraine packed with Macron. There does seem to be a closer relationship between Messrs. Johnson and Macron. The Guardian, do not give ground on Ukraine, PM tells leaders. That's the front page of the Guardian there. And I think, was it and the Metro? Yes, the Metro does go with this story. The Fool, Monty. And this is the idea that Boris Johnson suggested that they all needed to show that we have to show we're tougher than Putin. Shall we take our clothes off? This is what he said. In sweltering heat, by the way, in Bavaria. This is, of course, a reference to that picture. We all recall of Putin how, I think it was 2009, on holiday, riding bare-chested on his horse. And we also seen him fishing as well, I think, without his shirt on. Other front pages, well, this extraordinary story that I shared with you at the beginning of the show, Charles Cash and Bag probe, is the front page of The Sun. Of course, it has to be referenced that they did not break the story. That was the Sunday Times. This is the fact that Charles may find himself in part of a charity investigation after €3 million were reportedly given to him from the Qatari Sheikh Hamad bin Jabba Al Thani, bundled into a Fortnum & Mason carrier bags, a holdall and a suitcase. More on that story, as I say, to come. Front page of the Daily Mirror. This is a big story, one sense as you've heard it before, though. But this is the idea that many people are continuing to do what's known as DIY dentistry. The shortage of NHS dentists causing horrific suffering. Patients pulling their own teeth, reports the BDA, which is the British Dental Association. I'm not minimising or diminishing it for a moment. It is horrible, but I do sense we've heard it before. The Daily Express rush to cash in on homes before crash. What on earth does that mean? Rocketing numbers of homeowners are cashing in on the soaring value of their property to boost their spending power. Retired people are increasingly turning to equity release schemes to ease pressure from that cost of living crisis, which of course is predicted to get worse.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
Investigation or launches an inquiry or a demand. Britain is the £3 billion fraud capital of the world. Britain becoming, with losses rocketing to almost £3 billion a year.
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
UK far higher than other leading Western economies such as United States, Australia and Canada. The new wave of scams, it says, led to fraudsters stealing £700 million in April, compared with £200 million a month over the previous year. So they are going to town over that. But we will reflect on that decision that came in from the United States and, of course, the demonstrations in the US concerning Roe v. Wade over the weekend, and get your decisions. Lee in Dartford. Lee?
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, you were listening to those two female commentators. What did you take from that?
one that thought it was a great idea, which, yes, I kind of get. I can see the celebrations from in America as well. But remember, this is a country that lets 8, 9, 10-year-olds get killed, I don't know, what is it, once every 2 weeks?
Are you referring to school shootings? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so
right,
it's human rights for fetuses, but kids that are going to school, we're not really bothered about that because we still want to sell guns.
Well, the right to life would say the right to life would say there are laws on the statute book that prevent, obviously, children being shot. That's what they would argue, Lee.
But is there? Is it working?
No. There are laws, but no, clearly they're not working because it wasn't that long ago that we were dealing with the most recent school shooting. It is horrific.
It just seems funny that a country like that on the one hand it's like, oh, we're getting rid of abortion because, you know, life is life, and they don't seem to have, all right, they might have laws in place, but they don't seem to have much of a problem with little kids being killed because they've got to keep their guns.
I hear it's a very interesting juxtaposition. I don't think I could allow they don't have a problem with, because although they never get anywhere, these shootings always spark national outrage. You always have the incumbent president saying, and by the way, I'm using all of them here, I'm not being party political, whether it's Obama, whether it's Bush.
In a quarter of a mile of Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit and stay on the Parkway A312.
I don't think you say they are happy with it, they're not, but they don't take enough action, we certainly would know that. Thank you for getting us started, more calls coming in on that. Let's go to this other big story, front page of one of your newspapers today, The Sun. The Prince of Wales faces the prospect of a Charity Commission investigation after accepting a suitcase of cash from a controversial Middle Eastern politician. Prince Charles stands accused of grubby behaviour after it emerged he received 3 separate bundles of notes totalling €3 million, around £2.5 million, for his charity from Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jabbar Al Thani, the former PM, Prime Minister of Qatar. Charles Ray is royal author, broadcaster and journalist, former royal correspondent at The Sun, and joins me now. Well, when you heard this story, what was the first reaction that went through your mind, Charles? And is Charles in some sort of trouble, do you think?
When I first saw it, I thought it was a script for a movie referring to money laundering, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we have to say that they're saying that there's nothing illegal that's happened.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
Yes.
Continue on A312 for 1.5 miles.
I mean, I can't understand what it is with royals and very rich Arabs. They always seem to come a cropper somewhere. Let's not forget that his aide, Michael Fawcett, was forced to resign from his charitable trust after cash for awards involving an Arab billionaire. And, you know, the optics of seeing money, cash in a suitcase, a hold-all, and then the bit that I loved most of all was the Fortnum and Mason's carrier bag. Not just Tesco carrier bag, but Fortnum and Mason's carrier bag. And I was just wondering if they were bags for life, whether they could be reused for more money to come in.
What are the rules? What are the rules governing acceptance of cash donations by members of the royal family, Charles? Do we know?
Yes, well, the Charity Commission prefer the cash donations to be, you know, cheque or bank draft. Yeah. They're not terribly keen on actually, you know, cash just being handed over. And again, the money was actually counted. It was handed to Charles. It was actually counted in his office in €500 notes, which no longer exist. This dates back to 4 years between 2011 and 2015. And the Clarence House are saying, yes, they did the due diligence and governance and everything else, and the money was then handed over to the Prince of Wales's charity. There's no suggestion that Charles or any other member of the Royal Family kept any of this cash. It just doesn't look great, as I say, Nick.
I totally agree. Charles, we've covered some stories together down the years, but yes, I think we're both chuckling at this. And it's important, as Charles says, by the way, there's no suggestion in any way, shape or form that Prince Charles or any member of the family have benefited. Rather, it is his charitable fund, but it does look a bit odd. Charles Rowe, royal commentator, author and journalist, former royal correspondent at The Sun. Actually, interesting enough, you're calling about this as well. 7:28 is the time. Lenny's in Ashford. Lenny, this has a bit of a whiff to it, doesn't it? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yeah, well, I can't see what all the fuss is about.
What?
I cannot say. Well, really, you've got to look at the Sheikh. And that's the way he does business, and that's the way he didn't, you know, there's no skullduggery or nothing like that.
But excuse me, sir. No, I'm not suggesting it is, and I don't want to. But if this is the product of illicit operations, crime, or terrorism, I'm not suggesting the Sheikh is involved in any of the above. But if it's cash, we need to know the source of the cash. And Coots, which handled the cash, saying we do not discuss individual transactions. Well, I think Coots need to look to themselves as well for having handled it. How often does Prince Charles walk into Coots opposite Charing Cross Station with a Fortnum Mason bag with €1 million in it? I've never seen it.
Yeah, but what it is, that's the way the Sheikh does things, and he's done it with a good heart. Obviously, there's no cash for honours attached to it or anything like that. There's no skullduggery, and as long as it's all straight and above board, it makes no difference how he gave him the money.
Well, let's see if others agree. Lenny, no investigation required, you say, Lenny. Nothing to see here.
Well, not really, no. I should stop wasting people's time.
Right, nothing to see, says Lenny. Let's move on if that's how he chooses to do it. Who cares where the €3 million came from? Lenny, thank you. Christine, I want to talk to you about that. And you've got a very important point to make about Roe v. Wade, and we'll do that the other side of the news. We must also reflect, of course, sadly, on the Ukraine war, that Kyiv was, for the first time in months, on the receiving end yesterday morning of a Russian airstrike. And we'll have more on that as well after the news. It's 7:30. This is Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, here on LBC. The news is with Holly Harris.
Volodymyr Zelensky will